Okay, so I'm going to finish up what I didn't get to yesterday, and that is adding a menu bar to our application. That's that's something that has been around for a while, and it's something that it's more or less expected. I know at one point uh, Microsoft was trying to kind of replace it with what they call the ribbon, that little thing, um, with varying degrees of success, but it's still around in Microsoft applications and some others, um, and that is uh, we can actually do something like that. I'm not going to get into it. It's called a toolbar in these parlance. Um, but we're not going to quite get into it because what I want to do today is look at just an extremely simple way of manipulating text, or at least with respect to the file system. So this uses something called a JText area, which uh, the other text thing that we had that a user could enter was the text field, and that was just a single line. A text area is kind of what you're used to when you have like an editor or something else. Like in NetBeans, the code editor is an example of that. Now there are the text area is just a bare bones, very simple thing. There's a fairly involved, more complex thing involving documents and all kinds of fancy stuff. We're not going to get too much. We're not going to get into that. But the dealing with the issues about opening and saving files, that's going to involve an object of type JFileChooser, which, as its name indicates, is something that we choose a file, whether we're opening the file or saving the file. And it's all too easy to kind of fall into to what applications did back in the day, which was to just kind of do stuff, assuming that the user knew what to do and was doing exactly what they wanted to do, such as saving a file and just without comment, overwriting the existing file, just as one example. Or things like even things like if you have you ever been in a situation where you're in an application like maybe a Word document or Excel spreadsheet, and you want to open a file, and then you change your mind and want to do something else. So you want to give the user the option to do that. Okay, so all and the thing is that in a way there were kind of two slightly different philosophies, if you were, actually I mean, back in the day there was that kind of Unix, and then there was like DOS, and then there was Mac, and the Unix was developed by kind of really smart, not that the others weren't developed by smart people. It's just that their philosophy was you the user are the expert. You know what you're doing, and so if you ask the system to do something, it's just going to do it because it assumes you know what you're doing. The other, which was kind of really more sort of on the Mac side in terms of looking at the user experience and understanding that the user isn't always doing things that they really expect. In other words, there may be unintended consequences, or the user may be just sort of not really thinking things through. So in the first philosophy, it's like if I go to overwrite a file, they say, well, you know what you're doing, we're just going to do it. Whereas the other one says, okay, if you're about to overwrite a file, then are you really sure you want to do this? And now, obviously, It's like the quip that software development is has been a race between the developers to create idiot-proof software and the universe to create more idiots. And so far, the universe is winning. But the thing is, you don't have to be an idiot to kind of do idiotic things. I don't think I'm an idiot, but I do idiotic things from time to time, maybe more often than I like to admit. Anyway, so with that in mind, when we're interacting with the file system, especially writing stuff, we want to be really careful about that. Now, the other issue, which isn't okay, so the idea here is, well, we're going to add the menu to the mix here, and then talk about opening or reading a text file, displaying them in a JText area, we can actually sort of edit it. It's like out of the box, just the JText area provides a very rudimentary but surprisingly rich set of features just by instantiating it. Now it's not fancy. We can't sort of it's nothing like Word or something like that. But then sort of saving it with the usual safeguards. So, all right, so let's back up to the menu. So, applications these days expect some kind of menu. I mean, that's often the case. A lot of times when I see an application that doesn't have that, it's kind of, they keep kind of tweaking these things, and they're trying to make it kind of user-friendly, as if a user doesn't know how to use a menu. I mean, it's kind of like, you say, okay, well, that's too complicated, so we'll kind of hide in this little thing, and, well. Anyway, okay, so there are 3 classes that are involved with this. One is called JMenuBar, and that's the container that's going to have all the menu stuff in it. And there's typically only one per frame of this. I remember back in the day there was a little fad about kind of having multiple menus, and you could do that, but it turned out to be not such a great idea. Okay, so that's one class, and then right off of that are instances of JMenu. So the menu bar is what you would think, that's the sort of the bar that's the menu. The JMenu are all the different items that would populate it. We're just going to create one here, but you can create as many as you want, and those kind of go across. And then in the JMenu are the JMenu items, and each JMenu item is one thing that you're going to do. So for right now, we're going to just add to our little application the ability to exit from the menu bar. Okay, so that's now the JMenu items are abstract buttons. They're a subclass of abstract buttons, like the J button that we've been looking at. And so all abstract buttons fire an action event. So like when I select the menu item, it fires an action event. And so that allows me to use the same action listener that I've been using for the J button to just add to this without having to add any extra code. And as you know, the programmer virtue of laziness implies that if I can add additional functionality without doing a lot of extra work, then that's a positive thing. So the laziness virtue here is that the action event that I already have for the exit button is already so I have this exit thing that pops this up. How does that happen? That happens with the, I think I was calling it button, I probably should have called it exit button listener. Oops, no, not that one. It was the, Oh, no, I'm sorry, yeah. It was the window closer thing. Um, Now, it turns out that for complicated reasons, even though the J menu item is an abstract button, what it does, see what we were doing here, the J button has a direct link to its to the window that it was in. And the reason we need that is because that's what puts that's what puts this box centered on the window. So if I move the window somewhere else and I hit exit, it's going to, in other words, it's going to center it on the window that it was in, and that's because here I'm passing it the root, as it were. And here for the window event, it will give me the window by a simple getter. For the action event from a J button, I need to use the swing utilities to get the root. So here for the this was well, it would have. How should I say? Even in Java, there are these sort of vestiges of the early implementations. Before Java introduced generics, and I hope that I've emphasized enough how useful the generic ideas have been. We saw them, just to take a little side reminder, when we were looking at collections, by specifying that, say, this collection will contain, say, integers, then all of the methods like get and put and add, they will automatically be integers. And if I try to do something else, the compiler will stop me. However, that wasn't the way it, before they introduced generics, the only generic thing was an object. And so everything was an object. And what that meant was, well, first of all, there was the possibility of having different types of objects on the same container, whether I wanted to or not. So I could have integers, strings, playing cards, any object, because that was the only constraint. So it was up to the user to decide whether you could put something that was legitimate on. And then when I got something from the container, it came back just as an object. So I needed to, if I wanted to do anything with that, I needed to cast it. Now, what they've done is with generics, like we saw that with the combo box. See, because this combo box was specified as a playing card. Where are we here? We noticed that because it was specified as a playing card, I can, when I get the item, there are a lot of things that are kind of specified by playing cards. So like when I add the item, like here, add the item, you notice that the signature of add item is playing card. And that's because it was defined as a generic. And I think we used it as a, no, that was defined as a local variable. Yeah, here. So I defined it as a playing card with a generic. So adding the item has a signature playing card, and that the combo box itself has no idea what a playing card is, because that's in Java. But because of the generics, when I said, okay, I want to put playing cards here, it under the hood, it said, okay, we can do that. However, notice that when we are actually using these, when we get the selected item, the combo box brings it back as just an object, which you know, that to me is just an oversight on their part, and probably, you know, in other words, there's no reason for getSelectedItem to return an object. It should return whatever the generic is. But that's just sort of a vestige of the older way. Okay. So, what does that have to do with this? Well, sometimes we have to cast things. So in this particular case, since lots of different components, not just abstract buttons, can fire an action event, then there's the source can't, in this case, is just an object. So we have to cast it to an abstract button with the caveat that we will only have abstract buttons in there. Now, the JMenuItem is an abstract button, so it will work here. However, the problem is that the way they implemented the JMenuItem is that it does not have a direct reference to its ancestor, the ancestor window. So here, because every abstract button has a way to kind of basically walk up the set of Russian doll containers to find the ultimate window that it was contained in. Abstract buttons have that ability, and so this swing utilities method can go find that. You know, it kind of walks up that container hierarchy and gets that root, which we need to, in this case, we're using the root to pass to the window event because why? Because I only want to do this in one place. Now, I mean, if you don't like that, then you could just write the same code again. You know, that was the first attempt. I've commented that out just as a reminder that, you know, it's not the biggest sin in the world, but if it can be avoided, then you want to avoid it. But what you can't avoid is the fact that JMenuItems don't allow that. Like, they will allow that, but what happens is, in fact, I'll show you what what happens when Swing Utilities tries to get the window that a JMenuItem was in, and it's because of, in this case, you know, they had good reasons for doing it that way, but that's just the way it is. Now, so how do we implement the menu? Where is it? Okay, right here. So remember there are three different objects, classes here. So the top level is the JMenu bar, and we just instantiate that, and then there's a setter. Every JFrame has a setter called setJMenuBar. Guess what it does? It puts the JMenuBar and sets that as the menu. And okay, so they, you know, if for some reason, let's say for some reason I had two JMenuBars, and depending on the state of the application, I wanted to maybe swap them out, you could do it this way. You could kind of do it this way. Generally, that's not necessarily the best idea, but since a JMenuBar is a container, it contains JMenus instances. In this case, there's just going to be one, and the JMenu instances can be added or removed. I mean, like in all containers, we can kind of put stuff in, take them out. So here, I'm creating a menu, and the string that I give it is going to be what it's called. So like, well here, like all of these, like on a Mac, they put them up here instead of in the window, but each of these would be a JMenu. And in this case, the JMenu has the name file, and this is a JMenu with the name edit, etc. And then when I simply add that to the menu bar, and now to populate it, I populate it with JMenuItems. And here I'll call it an exit menu item, and the string that I pass to it is going to be what it displays. So, and I add it to the file menu, And then because it's an abstract button, I can add the window closer as an action listener. So this window closer is, again, fairly lightweight. It implements two interfaces. It has two methods, and and each method just has a few lines of code. So that's I've come to prefer small. Small is instead of it's good to have lots of relatively small objects running around. My experience has been that tends to make it easier to deal with the thing. Okay, so all right, so what does that look like? Well, okay, so here's our application, and so if we exit from this button, it says you really want to exit, and if I cancel, it says no, or if I decide to close the window, it comes up with the same thing. And then now, okay, here's the file menu, and when I click on that, it behaves as as expected. I mean, back in the day, when these things were all brand new to those of us who were kind of used to just the command line, then it took a little bit of getting used to, not a whole lot, but as you can see visually, it's more pretty much what you expect. So I see a little menu, I click on that, and then it opens up a little pop-up, and then I click on the exit, and then it too brings up exactly the same thing. Now, we take these kinds of things for granted. Like if you see a menu item like this and you click on it, you expect a pop-up. That wasn't always the case. In fact, Sun's microsystems that came up with Java, their Solaris operating system would have windows where some of the menu items, when you clicked on them, they would pop up, but others, when you clicked on them, they would actually make something happen. And you had to know which one it was. And needless to say, the applications don't do that anymore. Why? Because as a user, you want to have everything behave as you expect. And that, just one organization that I belong to, on the web these days, they've decided that it's too much effort to kind of do a click, and so what they like to do is they like to pop up things with a hover instead of a click. Right? You've been to these web pages, and in some cases you see something and you have to hover on it and then click, and others you hover on it and it pops up. If you try to click, it doesn't work. So this website had one main sort of method, and then what it did was it implemented this other program, and they hired another web developer to do the program, and so you would kind of go from the main thing to this other area, and in the main one, when you wanted to manipulate something, you clicked on it and it opened up the pop-up. In the new area, because it was you had to hover, and that was now. It's not that one is bad or the other is good. It's just that when you have a website, if everything is click, then you should make everything click. If everything is hover, make everything hover. So I mean, I'm pointing this out because these user interface issues can be subtle and important, and so when you're developing your application on whatever platform it is, and you're having these user experience issues, user experience issues can be very subtle. So, all right, so and I want to show you why that extra code was necessary. So let's run it in debug mode, but what I want to do is I want to show you what happens when we come here. So, so if I hit the exit button, then, okay, I've gotten to the here, this action performed. It's not a JMenu item, so I kind of go right to the thing. But look at what happens when I do it from here. Okay, notice that the root is null. Why is the root null? Because to reiterate what I said before, the JMenu, the way they've constructed the JMenu item, I think in order to make it as lightweight as possible, it does not have, it doesn't have sort of a direct access to its window. In other words, its window is that little, it's like an inner frame. And so its, quote, window is that little pop-up thing, but that's not really a window. So what you have to do is the J pop-up menu is its parent. And so we have to get that pop-up menu. And that pop-up menu has a thing called invoker, which is the thing that invoked it. And then we can get the root from Swing Utilities from that invoker. So that's what we have to do. And so now you can see that the root is actually an object, and so we can kind of deal with that. Okay, so that's how we create menus. Okay, text area. So basically, it's just plain vanilla text area. It's like a notepad or text edited in plain text mode on the Mac. And the thing is that plain text. When you're writing code, all code is plain text, not fancy text. The text area can be editable or not editable, and then the other little little gotcha on this is that some things that we're used to don't happen automatically. So in fact, I want to undo something. Where are we here? Undo this and show you what happens. Okay, so what is? Oops, I don't want that. Let's see. I think. Okay, so here's see this little white area here. This is where I've instantiated it. I've set it to be opaque, which seems to be necessary, and I've set the background color to be white, just to kind of distinguish it, because that's kind of what we're used to. And then basically we can, we just sort of have a little text editor there. All right, now, so here's what I want to do. I want to open a file and have the contents of the file displayed here. Get text file. So let's open a text file. Let's need to find. See, do we have, now notice, here, I'll show you how this works too, is that it only lets me select text files. So I need to find, of course, let me see here. I think I got some stuff in here. There's some. Okay, so it opened up that Heart of Darkness code that was in there. But then notice, now what do you expect when you have one of these text windows and there's more text than can be displayed? You expect little scroll things. Do we see little scroll things? Nope, they're not there. If I want to see more, I got to kind of pull it down here. Okay, so that's what I so that's what I undid over here. So in order to implement that, again, that it's very, very easy to implement that. What I can do is there's something called a JScroll pane, and so and again, I hope you're kind of seeing this kind of Russian nested doll idea of, when I say Russian nested dolls, you know what that is, right? So dolls within dolls, and so I mean, there's sort of a life-size Russian doll, kind of buying a ticket for the movies, and the the person says, "One ticket, really?" Anyway, okay. So in Java, this is the container idea. So these containers, we put containers inside of containers, and then we can put more containers inside those containers. And in fact, the menus are kind of like that. But the JMenu item is both a component and a container, a dessert topping and a floor wax. So we can, when you're in a situation, well, I mean, here's an example, like here where it says open recent project, that's not just a component, that's a container. So I can actually easily do something like that to my JMenu items by simply adding another JMenu item to that one, and then it'll do what that does there. The scroll pane, again, what you expect is you expect those little things to be kind of showing up. Now there's actually something I need to, all right, here. This will take me a little closer to where I want to be. Okay, so kind of open something, and now when I open up this thing, we see that there are these little scrolly things. And if it works both ways. So if it kind of gets like this, then I can kind of scroll this way as well, right? And all that is just by wrapping the JText area in one of these JScroll panes. So what I like about that is that, here's all it took. Here I instantiated the text area. This was to set the color to be white, and then to add the little scrolly things, I just take a scroll pane, I put the text area inside the scroll pane, and then add the scroll pane, not the text area. Then, and everything just kind of works out. So that's, I hope you're getting a sense that with relatively little code, you can kind of do, it's a good bang for the buck proposition. In other words, and the thing is that in a lot of times, kind of the old ways of thinking are a little bit too low level, and that's one of my critiques of how the book deals with this. In other words, if you're, there are certain situations where you kind of have to kind of work with the bytes at the byte level, but if you're in an object-oriented world, you're actually kind of at a much higher level of abstraction than that. Okay, so how did all that happen? In order for everything is happening inside of action listeners. So the open action listener was an inner class, and this is fairly important here. Now remember, I've talked about how important it is to make sure that the graphics are on the graphics thread and that other tasks are not on the graphics thread. That's an example of this. So when the activity of opening, reading, and reading a file is not a graphical one. That's a non-graphical task. And if it's a really large file, that may take a lot of time. And if you're doing something like opening the file over from a URL, which, we've seen, we can kind of do at a fairly abstract level. That's going to depend not only on the size of the file, but on network traffic, on what's happening on the server. I mean, there are lots of different factors that can make a particular task take a long time. When that happens, and it's a non-graphical task, then it should be run in a separate thread. And so, and there are different ways of doing that, but one way is to have in this case, my open action listener is also a runnable. So the user interface piece is going to be handled by the action performed method, and the actual task of reading the file is going to be in the run method. And so, well, now you can see there's an instance variable of type executor service. So remember, executive service is kind of the way that these should be done, not with the thread things. And in this case, for this particular application, I'm either opening a file or I'm saving a file, but I'm never doing both at the same time. And so my executor is actually going to be a single thread executor, meaning that the whole idea here is that the file tasks are going to be done in a separate thread, but I only want one of them running at a time. I don't want more than one running. If I try to do more than one, then the executor is going to block it until it finishes with the current task. Okay, so there's my executor. So my open action, okay, when it hears the action performed event, just as we, okay, well, we haven't quite done the file chooser. So that's our. Let's back up to see what the file chooser is. Now that's also an instance variable. It's an instance variable because why is executor and file chooser are instance variables? Well, because they're needed in more than one place. So the file chooser is going to be needed whether we open or whether we save. The executor, likewise, is going to be needed when we open or we save. So it's going to be needed in both places. So the only way to really do that is, well, not the only way, but the most effective way is to have them as instance variables, because then everything inside is going to have access to them. So the file chooser. Now, one of the things that I've by default, it'll open up like in your home directory or something like that. I wanted it to open up actually where I'm running the program, and that's actually a system property called user.dir. Now, the other thing that I did here is that by default, a file chooser will let me select any file whatsoever. And the thing is, I don't want that, because if I select like a Word document and try to read it as plain text, it'll just be gobbledygook. So there's no point in that. So what this does is this turns off the default behavior of accepting everything. So this says accept all file filter used. False means I'm only going to accept things. Well, at this point, I'm not going to accept anything. Okay, but what can I accept? There's a thing called a file filter. We've actually seen a different file filter when we were working with the command line. And turns out that there's a class of the same name, but it's a different class altogether. But there is it's an interface, so you can kind of roll your own. But the most commonly used one is to filter on the basis of the extension. So an extension on a file will typically, although not guaranteed, tell you what type of file it is. So if it's text file, the most common are ones with TXT, CSV for comma separated files, XML, there are a few others. But what this method does, by the way, if you remember, we talked about the varargs at one point. So it uses a varargs on the extensions, and this is a nice example of that, where it's like, how many extensions do I want to filter for? Well, in this case, there are 3, but I also, every now and then you'll have a text file where it's uppercase, so I don't want to not be able to select those, so this allows me to select those. And I simply add it as that file filter there. And so what that means is that when I go to open, you'll notice that here, the only, see, it'll let me select this, it'll let me select the CSV file, it'll let me select this file, but it will not let me select the gzip file. Okay, so that doesn't happen by accident. It kind of happens. Okay, so now here's the other thing. All right, so where are we here? Okay, so now what does it do? So the file chooser is similar to the J option pane. It says show the open dialog, and so show open dialog is what happens when we open and we see something like this. That's what it displays. Like the J option pane, though, it gives a user choice. Why? Because notice that I can either open a file, I haven't selected anything, so open is grayed out, or I can simply cancel. And which one did the user choose? Well, you don't know until it actually happens. So now I say, well, if it's the approve option, then I'm going to take, now this is a runnable. I'm going to execute this in my executor. And what that will do is that will invoke the run method. So here's my chosen file. And now notice what what happens here. When I open a file, see what happens to the title, right? And that doesn't happen by accident. What I did was I said, well, if I'm opening a file where I want to be able to show where the file is, and one of the things that Word does this pretty well. NetBeans is kind of doing it here as well. So I just set the title to the name of the file. So that way, see which file am I looking at. And then now this is sort of the scanner thing, and that's just sort of, we're used to sort of this, but here's what I need to do though, now if you're not careful. If I don't do anything, the text area has all that, everything that was in it before. It would be nice if they had a clear method. They don't. What I can do is I can simply start by setting the text to the empty string. So that clears out the text area. And now I instantiate my scanner with that chosen file. And the thing is that it throws a file not found exception, but that actually will never happen because I've actually selected a file. The file is right there. The only thing that can go wrong is somehow if I'm not allowed to read the file, it won't let me do that. So I'm reading it line by line, and then I'm appending the line, and then just one last little thing. For every line, I'm appending, the system line separator. What that does is that gives a system independent separator. Why? Because, well, in this case, Macs and Windows have two different ways of doing that. They're two different characters. So this gets me the line separator of whatever system I'm in, but I only do it if I have a next line. So what this does is this skips the last line. If I don't have this, then there's one extra blank line at the end, which isn't exactly what the file is. Okay, so you see the idea here. It's like the user interface is handled here. And then if the user has decided to do it, then I put it in a separate thread and not on the graphics thread. Because otherwise, what will happen is you'll have if I keep it on the, if I keep it here, if I keep it on the graphics thread, then if it takes a while to do it, my application is all locked up. And now sometimes I want to do that, and sometimes, you know, in this case I don't. I don't want the application to be locked up for that. Now the save action listener does pretty much the same kind of thing, except here, what I need to do is I need to I need to pass the I need both of these methods to know what the selected file is. The extra little thing is that if the file exists, this is where if I don't do something here, I could inadvertently overwrite the file. So I want to give the user one last chance to say, okay, you're about to save a file on top of another one. And how do I know about that? Well, I take the selected file and I say, does it exist? If it exists, then I'm going to use my JOption pane to show a confirm dialog that says, hey, this file exists, do you really want to overwrite? And then if the user says yes, then yeah, if the user says yes, here, yeah, all of this is in, the user said, yes, I want to do this. And if here, okay, I've just decided to do it a slightly different way. If you said no, that is, if you did not approve it, then I'm going to set the selected file to null so it's not hanging around, and I'm just going to return without doing anything. Otherwise, I'm going to submit again to the executor for the run. And then now there's a better, a slightly better way of doing this would be to use buffered streams, but nevertheless, a print stream actually is fairly reasonable for doing all that. I can just kind of use the, I'll just sort of print the whole freaking thing, and it turns out that actually is pretty. Now the interesting thing is that I get a lot of stuff here. So it's like I can, and I can't do the mouse stuff. If I wanted to do the mouse stuff, I'd have to add mouse listeners. But I'm hitting Command C, and that actually copied to the clipboard. And if I want, I can actually, well, if I do a Command A, that selects everything. If I hit delete, I've actually sort of cleared the whole thing. And now I can, now if I want to save it, I can actually sort of save it like that, and then hopefully, let's see, where is this going to show me where it is? That's what I just saved. So I just have a very primitive text editor here. And then for notice that the menu now has sort of the same options. And the menu can use exactly the same options for the same reason we had before. That is, they all go to the same action listener. And unlike the exit button, I don't have to worry about centering it on the frame here. Okay, so that's using this. Now for the next, I'm trying to. I haven't completely decided on what to do next. It's going to involve working with images somehow. I have a couple things that have. Okay, here's one that this actually is reading a web image. So this actually went out to the web, pulled down the image, and kind of threw it up here. That's kind of one. And then the other, let's see, where is it? Is it this one? Yeah, the other I thought was kind of cute. It was similar to the application we've been doing. And instead of kind of showing these things, what if we can kind of do something like that? And this actually, all of these images are in a zip file, so that leads to the thing is how do I grab some stuff out of a zip file and create these kind of images and then display them like this, so it's going to be one of those, something like that. Okay. So see you tomorrow. I'll have not that I'll have some other stuff for you, some fun stuff for you to do that will be kind of like what we've been working on.